David Cameron is to spell out his case for reforming the EU as he prepares for next week's Crunch summit in Brussels. He is expected to use a speech in Hamburg, Germany, to set out the wider agenda behind his renegotiation of Britain's EU membership. It is his final major speech before next week's meeting of EU leaders, where he hopes to secure agreement for the renegotiation of the UK's membership. It comes as 130 Tory councillors urged him to admit his EU talks had failed. The Prime Minister is keen to get a final deal in place in time for him to put the new terms of membership to the British public in a referendum in June. Case for action. The BBC's Brussels correspondent Ben Wright said Angela Merkel, who will speak to Mr. Cameron later, had been advising him on what is and isn't possible in his renegotiation, while making it clear she wants a settlement that keeps Britain in the EU. Downing Street said Friday's visit, including the speech at 21:00 GMT, would be about setting out the case, talking through the proposals, talking about where we are, reminding people of some of the reasons why we are taking this course of action. Donald Tusk, the European Council President who is brokering the talks on the UK's renegotiation process, has warned that the political process remains very fragile, with some leaders still harbouring reservations about the plan, particularly over limits on welfare payments to new EU migrants. He has cleared his diary in order to hold talks with some of the skeptics, said to include French President François Hollande, Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras, Romanian President Klaus Iohannis and Czech Premier Bohuslav Sobotka, ahead of the summit. Negotiations on the final wording of the deal, which includes an emergency break on benefit payments to EU migrants and a UK opt-out from ever closer union, look set to carry on right up to the summit. Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond said on Thursday that there was still only a working draft and that there were outstanding issues which needed to be addressed. Inside change. But campaigners for the UK to leave the EU claimed the latest revised text represented a further watering down of a plan which they had already dismissed as hopelessly inadequate. More than 130 Conservative councillors have warned the Prime Minister risks splitting the party unless he accepts his renegotiation has failed and he campaigns for Britain to leave the EU. You made clear that if you did not get the deal you wanted in Europe, you would not rule out campaigning for Britain to leave the European Union yourself, and we hope you will now unite your party and Britain in doing so, they wrote in a letter to the Daily Telegraph. Former Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls told the BBC that the economic and migration challenges which have beset Europe in recent years had been a disaster for the EU's standing in the UK, and he expected a gradual erosion of the core principle of freedom of movement in the future. But the Labour politician said he supported David Cameron's argument that British influence can be used to make real change in Europe, telling Radio 4's Today that you can only make changes from the inside.